Okay, going on with it, the cooperator in this case provided the production fields, both the legacy and the EPIC plot or field, all production costs, and all farm operations. Okay, the EPIC group provided the technologies, those AquaSpy probes, the modeling through AquaPlanner, and then pivot track in cases where there was not an existing monitoring system. And then EPIC provided slight consulting on irrigation management. There was not much given to varieties, not much to planting date, not much to fertility, basically looking at that one time where we might pull 1 inch of water off, or a couple times a year we might get that opportunity. The idea was being, let's not tamper with that production setting, allow that producer to produce in the way that he normally would with just very slight modifications that would be easily repeatable within his farm plan. Okay, so our results. I wish we had a larger screen to show this, but it's pretty darn staggering. Dallam County, we were not able to have a reduction. The producer felt like it was just way too stressful of a year. Okay, so we've got a yield of 207 bushels, but no legacy or EPIC to control it to. It starts to get really exciting when we start to look at the comparison between legacy and EPIC. Hartley County, we were able to reduce applied irrigation water by just over 3 inches. Exact same yield, plot to plot, 241 bushels. Okay, pretty impressive. Hutchinson County, the drip between the legacy and the EPIC plot. The legacy had 20 inches of irrigation, the EPIC plot 17.4 inches. Difference in yield. The legacy plot 180 bushels, EPIC plot 190 bushels. Yield improvement, reduction in water. Ochiltree County, legacy plot 31.2 inches, EPIC plot 30 inches of irrigation water. Yield, legacy plot 168 bushels, EPIC plot 20 bushel improvement, 188 bushels. Okay, again, less water, in this case, more yield. Sherman County, legacy plot 28.6 inches, EPIC plot 25.6 inches, yield difference 140.8 bushels to 171 bushels. Very stark difference. Okay, I'll get into some of the caveats with this as we go through, but in no case did the field with more water yield higher than the field that had less water. Continuing on with this summary, if we look at them, in Dallam County, obviously it was a flat across, no comparison. In Hartley County, we had 3 inches of reduction, no yield change. The difference in profit from doing this just by cutting the irrigation costs on a direct energy cost would be $19.20 per acre. Okay, so we're starting to spread that profit gap. Okay, this is where it starts to get really wild. Hutchinson County, we had a change on the input of 2.6 inches, 10 bushel increase, economic benefit to that producer from one to another would be over $65 per acre improvement. Ochiltree County, 1.25 inches, 1 irrigation pulled, 20% different, or 20 bushel yield difference, total economic difference, $107.50. In Sherman County, 3 inches different, the percent yield change was over 30 bushels. His economic difference in profit between those two plots, nearly $170. Okay, this is exactly what we're talking about. Be a little bit wiser with your water, spread that profit gap. In these cases, though, we're also doing something that's a really nice indicator. We're not asking for a compromise in yield. We're returning a higher yield, and I think that's something that could be seen in lots of places. It's been my experience that in most places we tend to over-irrigate much more than what we under-irrigate. We try to play it safe, and we create some early crop stress and potentially waste a little bit of water at the end when it's not going to be useful to the plant. Okay, here's my caution on these. It's very much needed in any sort of results demonstration. It needs to be viewed as local, anecdotal samples. It's certainly not conclusive scientific evidence. Don't bank on this. Try it for yourself and see if it's going to work in your situation. Second, we obviously have no replications in this, and the purpose of it is to display methods that have previously been proven either through theory or through continued research so that you can promote that application of it. Appropriate conclusions from this is it appears to be feasible to reduce irrigation to improve economics. Okay, not that it's going to give you yield, but it certainly is showing to improve your economics. And this methodology can be employed on a production scale. What we're basically doing here is scaling something up from something that's theoretical research, moving into production size, and it's still working on a big scale. Okay, I want to go through a couple of lessons that we saw within these results that I think are even more telling for your management. Big lesson from Hartley County. This lesson basically was provided to us by Pivot Track and AquaPlanner. What they provide is a monitoring of the application of irrigation throughout the year. What I was able to do is look at this postseason and see, why was this producer able to produce almost standard yield? Okay, this guy's probably in a 250 to 260 bushels on this field. This season in severe drought, he was at 241 bushels, 33 inches of water. Okay, I tend to think that he's a pretty good producer and a good consultant with that. Some things that he did that I think really contribute to this, that are take-homes that can transfer anywhere. No pre-water. Okay? He saved some water there. He delayed his planting date slightly. Look, his first irrigation was right after his planting, late April. By doing that, he started to offset that physiological demand for water. In some cases, he missed that big hit in June that some of his neighbors got, just by pushing it back just a couple of days. And the last one, and the most telling one that we've heard now a couple of times, is as he saw the conditions change, he slowed the pivot down to match his application rate, provided deep application. He already started knowing that he wanted to get as much water into the soil as possible. But look what happens here when he gets into those days in June that we know are really hot. He switched from 1.25 inches to 1.66 inches per application and works all the way down to his last application is nearly 2 inches of water. Okay, he could see that his soil was holding it, and he was getting a huge benefit out of it. And his results, I think, show it. He yielded very high for this year. His economics are really good as well. Okay, some lessons from Ochiltree County. This is the EPIC plot. Okay, we ended up with 188 bushels here with 32.6 inches of total water applied. That's not irrigation, that's total. We had our field day that went out to this plot in, I think it was the 23rd of August. And we looked, and that producer had, on his windshield wipe pivot, run it one way and was starting to come back. And we started thinking, you know, we haven't had an opportunity to cut water here because it's been so dry. Let's take a look at your field now. And so we looked at the AquaSpy charts, found that it was showing that he was in that saturated position. Now, we pulled this up on a computer as well as phones on site out in the field, and I went and ground truthed it by pulling samples and said, personally, I would stop your irrigation now. You've got enough to finish your crop. And he says, well, typically I would be putting one more round. My pivot's coming back around. Well, he said he'd be willing to stop that pivot, point it straight north so we can divide those plots like we had intended, putting an inch and a quarter more on one side than the other. Okay, so this is the EPIC plot. Right in this area, you see that saturated peak, and then the crop using the water out of the soil to finish the crop off. The legacy plot, you can see here's that irrigation we just saw, and now the pivot's coming back around, puts on this huge peak of an inch and a quarter that had nowhere to go in the soil. Okay, he basically applied it, thinking to himself, this is insurance, but his results don't show that it was much insurance at all. From doing this, his legacy plot, 168 bushels, and a little bit more water applied on that. Something that's really neat to notice about this, and we'd have to go back to the results to see it, but this total water number is very similar. The difference was the previous one, the EPIC managed plot where we withheld that last irrigation, extracted the difference that it needed from the soil, where this one filled up the soil profile, where he left more water in the soil profile than what he actually began with at the start of the season. Okay, some other things that we looked at when we were in the field to help us make this decision. We looked at the AquaPlanner model, which what it does is it starts to calculate throughout based on your additional rainfall events, irrigation events, etc., and it can start to project to you how much water that you're going to need. This gave us some confidence in field that the model based on solid evapotranspiration principles is saying that to finish this crop from the point we were at to the point it needed to be would take in the range of 2.5 inches of water, and we said, shoot, we've certainly got that, and that's what happened. Okay, it functioned, provided us a yield. At least it maintained that yield. In this case, fortunately, it did improve it, but we were able to reduce the applied water by 1.25 inches. Some lessons from Hutchinson County. This is AquaSpy charts. What we did in this was we had this EPIC plot, and what we asked for early was a reduction of slight irrigations early. Now, being on subsurface drip, he had the opportunity to be, one, very efficient with his water, but two, make some incremental small changes and keep that still within his operating system. Okay, so we asked for him to pull 2 irrigations, which equated to about 0.7 inches early, and what you can see here is that this plant responded by sending roots down and having some sort of plant water extraction activity happen to much greater depth than what this legacy field did. Now, of course, it finally got down there in severe drought years, because of the drought year. However, this crop was certainly built up to be prepared for that when the heat came. And visibly in the field, even though this one had less water, you could tell no difference in the visible signs of stress. As a matter of fact, the drip compared to any of the pivots around that area that had a little bit higher drops, the drip showed certainly less stress within the canopy. Now, there's no yield difference to substantiate merits in that per se this year, but it seemed like the drip getting short, regular shots of water was able to have a benefit from that. Okay, this is something else I want to show. This is some aerial photographs taken from this plot shortly before harvest, and something that's happened here. This plot is our legacy plot. Okay, this is our epic plot, and this corn still yielded 180 bushels per acre, even though in mid-August it's showing that it should be burnt up. Well, this burnt up sign here, in actuality, is a sign of that crop senescence. Okay, it started to slow down much earlier than the rest of the field and was dried down quite a bit earlier, and I think was not able to grain field as good as the other plots. Just for reference on this, because we felt like without having a fetch blocker on this, that we did probably get some side effects on this legacy plot. We also looked at the rest of the field to see what that yielded. On this rest of this Hutchinson County field, the yield was still 5 bushels less than the epic plot and had substantially more water applied to it, this according to flow meters. And so the flow meter going into this whole field said that the average would have given us 29 inches of water. This epic plot received low 20s, legacy plot mid 20s. Okay? On this, I want to make a point that this was another cooperator we had. NetFM provided us with some flow meters to break this up, since this is a NetFM system. To display these results and promote this project and this process, we had 4 corn field days during the summer in August, very well attended, 166 total attendees. Some of them had trade shows, multiple different discussions, and all of them, except for the Dalhart one, had an actual field day. Okay, so the future of EPIC, some things to look at. I feel very strongly that in order to substantiate any of this, we need a minimum of at least 3 additional seasons. We'd like to upscale to include 1 producer from each North Plains Groundwater Conservation District county. That was our goal this last year. We did have trouble finding a couple of cooperators in some counties. I think with these results, we can now pitch this project in a much better light. Okay, we would like to introduce the repeat cooperators to the technologies that were hidden from them to maintain the control, allow them to get a hands-on feel for how they can manage based on those technologies and others that are emerging. You know, part of this is the thought that we know we're going to get much more technical in our management. If we don't start with what's on the market now to manage this, we're just going to be farther and farther behind as the newer, maybe even to some degree improved technologies come out. And the last one is, I think this is a package and a program that's non-invasive enough that it's easy to transfer to other grain corn areas. We're looking at hopefully finding some producers that'd be willing to work with us in the Panhandle, Groom, Pampa area. Maybe start working with some other districts that would be interested in a project like this. Basic summary: save incremental water, improve production. Preserve the aquifer to allow time for technology to be more efficient at extracting that water. And demonstrate methods to maximize profit. I can't help but think of how well this fits in with our goal with the Ogallala Aquifer Program, sustaining rural communities through new water management technologies. That's exactly what we're trying to do here, and I feel very strong that these results show that we have a lot of ground that we can pick up on really quickly if we start paying attention to these simple things.